All right. I'd like to call the January 11th, 2022 Lake Mills Public Works Board meeting to order. Missy, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Picard?
Here.
Mr. Temperley?
Here.
Mr. Fields? Mr. Polachek? Mr. Reich?
Here.
Mr. Replinger?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, up next is the correction and approval of the minutes of November 9th, 2021. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
That was Mark approving and Ben at second. Did you get that, Misty?
I did, thank you.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
nays? No nays, so the minutes are approved. Agenda item 4, questions and public comment. I do not think there are no members of the public here, or doesn't look like anyone's online. If there is, just let me know. All right, so off to agenda item number 5, the director's report.
All right, thank you very much. Just got a few items I'll go through here fairly quickly.
Just a second, Misty, Mr. Fields just came in, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Steve. First of all, in regard to the 2021 LSL program, we ended up with 49 replacements. All of the, well, most of those on the private side, I think maybe 1 or 2 on our side. And that we had applied for 75. So as I've mentioned in other meetings, that means we simply don't collect or don't get that other 25 worth of LSLs. But that's okay, because it doesn't have any effect on our application for 2022, which, by the way, we have now sent in a draft, to the DNR, and everything is good, all in line. The situation with the loan funds is going to be a little bit different this year, and then possibly a lot different in subsequent years. So I'll just give you a little bit of information. Some of this I think I told you last month, and now it's just a little more solid, and that is of the 64, or actually it was just under $64 million that was allocated for LSL replacement statewide, 34 million was spent. And the DNR is acknowledging that this money will probably, if everything goes well, this money will probably run out this year, or if it doesn't, there'll be very little left for next year. However, the timing is pretty good in that the infrastructure bill money will probably kick in. I'll just give you a side note. We don't have all the information on that one. What they're looking at, though, is that those monies will be distributed to states in 49% of the funding will be in principal forgiveness loans, and then the other 51% will be in legitimate loans, usually the prime rate, or maybe a tad lower than the prime rate. So it's fairly cheap loan, but it will change a little bit the way we would fund public and private LSLs. But again, we're waiting for more of that. Just a couple other quick pieces of information here. According to everything now that's been reported to the DNR, there's about 234,000 LSLs in the state that need to be replaced, and at an average cost of about $5,000. That's a pretty good number. I calculated over $1 billion that Wisconsin would need to replace all of them. I don't know if that's going to happen. And the DNR is also acknowledging in this regard that some people just aren't going to do it, and they're kind of wrestling with how they approach that. So anyway, I guess the bottom line for us for this year is that we will make our official application, and I have absolutely no doubt that we'll get all the funding we need for 22. Similar to 21, the vast majority of the replacements will be on the private side only, and we kind of planned that so that our expense comes a little bit later. And if I'm correct in my anticipation of what the infrastructure funds will do, we'll be able to use some of that to cover our funds, or our costs also. So the projects continue. It's still a high priority for the EPA, and I think we're situated fairly well. Okay. Quick EMI update. We are still waiting for water meters, and now we've gotten word that electric meters are going to be a little slow. Again, it's because of the chip issues. We're not even getting promises anymore as to when the water ones will be ready. So we're a little upset about that, but not a whole lot we can do. Staffing, I think I've mentioned for a couple meetings now, we are one person short in the street department. And we're just very thankful we haven't gotten hit with a real heavy snow event yet. We've been able to keep up quite well, but we're going to fill that position as soon as we can. And what we did when Dave Ward retired, as you guys were talking about before, we moved Mark Yandre into the foreman position. And so we filled that position with someone who was at the wastewater treatment plant. He moved over to the streets department. And then one other gentleman left the streets department to go work for actually Jefferson County. So that's the position we're looking to fill there. What that means then, though, is that we've got an opening in the wastewater treatment plant. So we're looking to fill that one also. We're hearing from everybody, and you've probably heard this too, that's kind of what's happening right now. And I know, Steve, you've had issues with people moving and finding people and that sort of thing. So we shall see. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll see how this all goes and how we make do. The next one, electric costs. This is kind of an interesting one. We have been told by WPPI, our power supplier, that for the first quarter of this year, they're anticipating higher costs than budgeted, about 3 to 5% higher than were budgeted. And there's a couple of things going on. One is the cost of natural gas, as you know, is quite high. And several years ago, many power producers opted to go to natural gas, kind of leave coal and go to natural gas. And so, you know, we're paying a little bit of the price for that. And then the other part of that is transmission line congestion. And what that simply means is that there's more power flowing through the grid, and it's actually more of it's going to very specific areas, larger cities, et cetera, et cetera. And so it causes congestion. And when that happens, it's, you know, just like the law of supply and demand, the cost of energy goes up. And so again, PPI is predicting that we'll see this problem the first quarter of this year. That's bad news. The good news, if there is any here, is that, as I mentioned, PPI is anticipating an increase of about 3 to 5%, and that will be, you'll see that through the power cost adjustment clause. We are aware that one of the local investor-owned utilities is telling their customers, be prepared for 10 to 15% increase through the first half of 2022. Two things are happening here. One is that WPPI has got a very diverse portfolio. They didn't really go heavily into natural gas, but they also have a lot of renewable, a lot of hydro, a little bit of nuclear, and, sorry, not nuclear, pardon me. I'll be chastised for that one, but a good diverse portfolio. And then the other thing that WPPI has that is really effective is that every month when we pay our power bill, we also pay a very small percentage. I think it's either 1/10% or 1/4% into what's called a rate stabilization fund. And what that does is creates a kitty of money so that if rates begin to fluctuate too much in a given time, there are dollars there to put in so that the wholesale cost is underwritten a little bit, if you will, so that we don't see those high spikes. We don't see a lot of major up and down. We keep it pretty steady. As of yet, we haven't had to use that. And PPI is going to do the very best they can to not use that. But it's there in the event that that happens. So the moral to this story is, I guess, that there will be a slight increase, or residents will see, all customers will see a slight increase in their PCAC. We anticipate it to be for the short term. excuse me, and if it does carry on to the longer term, we've got some options with mitigating that increase. So that's what I've got. Dwayne, I don't know, do you want to do a quick street construction update? I probably didn't warn you about that.
Okay, not a problem. Really just an update. Tonight, we're going to talk next about Oak Street. That's the 2022 street reconstruction project. And at least the current plan for the maintenance plan, we will bring our review of the capital improvement plan that we talked about last summer. Mark and I will be starting to look at that information as the weather starts thawing in the spring and as the freeze cycles happen. So we propose to come in like we did last year in the March Public Works Board meeting, talk about sidewalks, talk about the maintenance program again, any changes that might have occurred from last year. As far as our tentative schedule that I sent out to staff is we're basically 1 day earlier than, because of the days of the meeting schedule, we're 1 day earlier than everything we did last year. So the timing will be very similar with chip seal and mill and overlay. And if you need those documents, I believe if you go to the August Public Works Board and the August council meeting, where the proposed maintenance streets are, those documents are still online.
Is that it? Any
That's what we
questions?
got.
All right. We'll move on to agenda item 6, discussion on 2022 reconstruction project for Oak Street.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Hostel. I'm with Strand Associates, and just to talk about a little bit about Oak Street for the 2022 reconstruct. Very similar to last year with Lake Street, Reed Street, and Jefferson Street. This will be a complete reconstruct of all utilities, new water main, new sanitary sewer, and a little bit of new storm sewer. The project limits are between Main Street and Mulberry Street. So there's going to be some coordination with the postal office there and the library and the bank on kind of rerouting some local traffic in that area. The storm sewer, it's very small, and it's still decided if the city street department will do that work. We have a meeting tomorrow with the foreman, and we'll decide at that point. Project cost right now is about $525,000. And if there are any questions, feel free to go ahead, or if Brandon has any additional comments.
It was a pretty good summary. I mean, the plan set was, our preliminary plan set was in the packet for people's review if you wanted any more details there. But I think Matt pretty much covered it.
So I think as much as anything, this is kind of an FYI to you that we will be going out for bids now and seeing how this one comes in. But this is really our major project for 22.
And it's the street itself, the curbs and the street width and the elevations look like they're all pretty much staying the same.
Yeah, we're gonna basically keep everything how it is right now. Just new curb, new gutter, complete sidewalk replacement. Everyone's driveway aprons between the sidewalk and the curb will get all replaced with concrete. So basically keeping everything the same, just getting a new road for the residents.
Maybe mention just west of the library, we will be talking with that property owner about possibly lowering that sidewalk to some degree, correct, Matt?
Yeah, there's a pretty steep section there on the south side of Oak Street between the library and the chiropractor's office that we're going to lower the sidewalk about 1.5 feet. It's right now it's pretty steep on that duplex driveway, so basically going to help lower that and regrade behind the sidewalk a little bit for that residents to create just a better slope for the project.
Maybe some other key points. The plan ends at the concrete at Main Street, so the project does not anticipate interrupting traffic on Main Street too much, but as far as replacing concrete or taking the utilities into the Main Street, that is not proposed at this time.
One other thing I'd add is we're proposing to keep everything that was just done for the library parking lot a few years ago. So the driveway apron, the sidewalk, there will be a little bit of tie into the storm sewer. At the time when we built that, there's an infiltration basin there that there was no storm sewer overflow available, but now we'll be putting storm sewer nearby, and so we're going to kind of tie that basin into the storm sewer as well. But most of the things that was done for the library parking lot a few years ago will remain and, you know, be untouched essentially.
So the biggest impact is the post office, and right? The exit will be,
Well, the post office and the bank drive-through,
yeah.
so we're going to be talking with them about how to best handle that. That'll be a tough part. It's pretty
Right.
busy right there.
But it needs to be rebuilt, so.
Yes.
and It'll be a faint memory years from now.
That's the way we like to hope it happens.
Yeah,
To that
How many
point,
weeks
we're
do you
looking to
expect
set up
the
a meeting with the bank, the post office, and the library to coordinate those driveways and coordinate that into the contract itself. Matt, did you mention the dates, the ad and the bid?
Yep, so going out for advertisement on January 27th. That's 2 weeks from Thursday here. Bid opening is on the 10th, February 10th. So hopefully we're get some good bids here before the council meeting, so we can approve that.
How many weeks do you expect the project to take?
It's a relatively short stretch. We're kind of thinking about 2 months on like the longer end. We are going to write into the contract when they do start the project to not just drag out for a long period of time throughout the whole summer. So whenever they do end up starting it, to finish it within 2 months.
Okay, thanks.
To that point, though, we are also, Matt, correct? We will try to keep the length as long as possible to try and keep the prices down so that we open it up to as many contractors and we're not limiting when they want to do this project within 22. And you're working on that language, correct, Matt?
Yep, that's correct.
any other questions? All right. We'll move on to item number 7, discussion and recommendation and wastewater treatment plant facility. Usually we start off with a motion to approve a prepared motion, but that prepared motion has a blank in it. So we'll go ahead with discussion first and then do the motion after discussion.
Okay, thanks. And I appreciate you mentioning that. I want to mention and have you notice that we're going to try to ask you to make a motion to accept an option as opposed to a motion to not accept one.
Okay.
But it's a subtle difference, but I'll throw that out there and you can kick me around if you want to. The reason that this is coming back is that between our last board meeting and the council meeting is we had a meeting with the DNR. And during that meeting, it was pointed out to us that the third option that you had kind of selected by default maybe didn't totally fit within the criteria, the funding criteria that the DNR has laid out. And so they asked us to go back and see if we could monetize, I guess was their word, monetize some of the intangibles. And so Scott and Travis from Strand have done some of that work and are going to be presenting those numbers to you today. The other thing I want to point out, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, is that we've been in more discussions with the DNR, subsequent discussions with the DNR, and you know, more things are kind of starting to get discussed and come to light and that sort of thing. And so this has become a pretty dynamic process. It doesn't mean, if you will, that our time frame is any different. We still want to be looking at some compliance with the, what's the word I'm looking for? The permit, our permit by 2025. And so we still have to keep moving forward, but not at the cost of not making sure we discuss everything as in depth as you want to, and that we don't explore misexploring anything, any other options and that sort of thing. So with that little bit of base, I'll turn it over to Travis, who is remote today, or Scott, if you had a few comments you want to make. Okay. All right, so Travis is going to share his screen, I think, and go through where we are now.
Okay, hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, and are you able to see the presentation?
Yep, we can see it.
Great, okay. So yes, that was a great introduction, Paul, to the topic here. I think what we'll do is we'll just start with a brief recap of where we were at the last board meeting, and then we'll get into some of the new discussion. So this is a graphic that was shown in previous meetings showing the preliminary rate impact for the various discharge options that are being evaluated. And just as a refresher, option one is keeping the existing treatment plant location and continuing to discharge to Rock Creek. There are a variety of capacity and permit related improvements that are required as most of the plant's infrastructure is now at least 30 years old, and much of it is well beyond its useful life from an age standpoint, and is also lacking in capacity. Option two includes keeping the treatment plant as at its existing site, but moving the outfall location to the Crawfish River rather than Rock Creek. And that would be accomplished through construction of a effluent pump station and a force main that would convey the effluent to the Crawfish River. And the main benefits of that option are regulatory in nature. It would eliminate the low-level phosphorus limit that has been imposed on the Rock Creek that is in the treatment plant's current compliance schedule. And there's also a risk of more stringent regulations coming in the future on Rock Creek, especially if Rock Creek becomes reclassified versus the Crawfish River, which is a much larger river and has a lot more dilution available and is much less likely to get those more stringent limits in the future. And then option three, we have three different sub options for that, but the gist of option three is construction of a brand new plant outside of the city that would discharge to the Crawfish River. And we looked at three different technologies, a range of technologies, and they were all fairly similar in cost, as shown in the graph here. And just to explain this graph a little bit further, we had evaluated population projections based on what was provided by the Department of Administration, which is the DNR accepted method. Those are the solid bars on this graph. And we had also looked at a higher population projection, and those are the hatched bars. And this graphic shows the potential rate increase above that black line, which is the current rates for the various options. What this graphic did not capture was monetizing some of the what we were calling non-monetary factors, and we'll get into that in some further discussion here. So regarding DNR's input, we've been in communication with DNR on a pretty regular basis through this process, and obviously this is a major project regarding what option, regardless of what option is selected. So we wanted to keep DNR engaged and kind of talk through where things are at. So we had a meeting, as Paul mentioned, and explained where we were at in the analysis. And DNR noted that they will typically require the lowest cost alternative based on a total 20-year total present worth. So that's incorporating both the upfront capital cost and then the long-term O&M costs over the course of 20 years, all taken back into current dollars. But they did indicate, and we have seen this on numerous occasions in other projects, that on a case-by-case basis, they will approve alternatives that are 10 to 20% higher than the lowest cost option. And there's a variety of reasons why they allow for that. Sometimes it's safety reasons. In this case, there's obviously a lot of non-monetary impacts from moving a treatment plant out of a city, out of residential areas that need to go into the evaluation, but are somewhat difficult to monetize. So the task was for further evaluation of the costs, including monetization of some of those non-monetary impacts that weren't originally included in the original cost analysis that I was just going through on the previous slide. And go ahead.
Can I ask a question on this? Sorry for interrupting you. So I guess I'm curious about this. Is this like a new thing that came up about that they were requiring the lowest cost alternative, or is this pretty traditional? I think I was just a little blindsided by that they had input into the cost aspect of it for approval.
They do have economic language in the code that is applicable to wastewater treatment plants. So I would say this was more of getting clarification as far as how they wanted the non-economic evaluation handled in this situation, because they do require an environmental evaluation in facility plans, which is typically outside of the economic evaluation, and they do require a thorough review of some of the items that we'll go through. It's not entirely black and white as far as how they go about approving an option that is not the lowest cost alternative. It's somewhat of a gray area, and that's where I think the value of this discussion came in, where they said they felt comfortable approving something based on non-monetary impacts that was 10 to 20% higher. Basically, they want the cost to be somewhat in the same ballpark, although they, because they recognize that some of these non-economic factors can have a big impact on the quality of the project.
So the process for this, I mean, just to lay it out, and this may not be a question for you, Travis, but like we would hopefully make a recommendation tonight. Would that then go to City Council and then go to the DNR, and then the DNR would have the say as to whether we're going to go forward with it, or yes. I guess what's our potential pitfalls here?
Yeah, so that's exactly the process that things would go through. So after after we get through board and then council making a recommendation, then a draft facility plan would be developed, and we would very likely continue to coordinate with DNR and fill them in on where things are at so that we're not surprised. But ultimately then that facility plan, which includes the details of what has been selected, would need to be approved prior to actual design and then construction of the upgrades.
So theoretically, say we approve a higher cost option, then and then the City Council goes along with it, but the DNR says no, you haven't made a good enough case. What happens then?
I think I think then we have to revisit this, taking into account their comments, because they ultimately have the say in the approval, regardless of what option gets selected. They will be the ones that need to buy in and approve the plan.
Okay, so would it would essentially get? I mean, well, then it would really limit our options, I guess, and we'd clearly know what we would have to select.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to throw a thought in here, and then Scott, if you have another one, you might want to go up to the podium there. But this is a little different. We're kind of used to working with the PSC, where the PSC has control over our rates, and that's how they control what we do. This one's almost the other way around, where the DNR has control over the facility we build. They don't really have control over the rates, if you will, but they can use that as part of their decision as to whether or not they're going to approve the entire project. Ultimately, and I mean, keep in mind that anything we do has to go through a public hearing, and so that's where that's where the public will have a chance to say, no, I'm not gonna, we're gonna make comments that say, we're not gonna allow you to do this. So it's a little different process. It kind of gets to the same point, and it has the same effect, but, a real flat statement would be that we can do what we want. Now, that's not actually true, but in this case, we can propose to the DNR what we want to do, and if we can defend it on all fronts, that it's effective, that it's within the cost structure that the city will accept or the residents will accept, then we can move forward. But what they're trying to do is two things, and I think we need to understand that. One is to make sure that whatever we do ensures that the water that goes into the crawfish or the Rock Creek is of the quality that it has to be. And secondly, that we don't build something we don't need, and that we're simply spending money on something that we really don't have to spend money on. But is that kind of where you were going to go, Scott? Yeah. And again, the public hearing in this case is really key to how this happens.
Yeah. So I just want to dig into that a little bit, because we've been working on this for a little while, and we've had, it's been in the paper too, and we really haven't had. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Has there been public feedback on it? We haven't had members of the public in these meetings for a few months now, and I don't know if that was present at the city council meeting, but the public commentary around this, or opinion, has been largely absent outside of just what the Public Works Board and city council have been discussing.
Yeah, at this point,
That's the history of Lake Mo.
yeah,
The building we are sitting in right now had 56 meetings,
yeah.
and nobody commented until the tax bills went out, when it was too late.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
And now, I don't do Facebook. I do understand there's been some comments on there. I don't.
But that's Facebook, that's
That's
social
Facebook.
media.
That's
Yeah.
unofficial. But, your point is extremely well taken, in that we're kind of at this point where we want to keep the process moving, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we get all the input that we need to get, and that people understand what effect this will have, that, we are talking about a rate increase. We are talking about some adjustments in that way. Now, like I say, there is, by law, we have to have a public hearing before it's approved. And I guess the process indicates that we have as many ducks in a row as we can before that hearing, so that the public has something to respond to, as opposed to just a blank slate. It doesn't mean that once the public hearing is over, it's all done and we move on. Based on comments, we can make adjustments, that sort of thing. Last comment, and then I'll get off my soapbox. This is something we struggle with all the time, in that we try to, through the processes we have, make sure that people know what's going on. And every time we do something, and this is a huge magnitude project, someone will come back and say, well, you didn't tell us about that. And, we're both right. We did our best to get it to the public, but if you don't hear about it, then we didn't do a good enough job of communicating with you. And so, as far as the decision process goes, that's what you're here for, is to kind of work through some of these issues. And as far as getting this information out to the public, we've got to do everything we can to make sure people understand that part before the final decision is made, before the council actually puts their stamp of approval on it. So I don't know if I'm talking in circles here, but you get where I'm going?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think we
hear you.
we do a good job. I think we're one of the few communities that has cable access, and our meetings are on the internet. So nothing's being kept secret. Yeah.
So
From
I
our
have a quick
perspective.
follow.
Yeah.
I have a quick follow-up question, because obviously the DNR is going to be a big linchpin. And Paul, you mentioned before that this has been a very dynamic situation. There have been some subsequent meetings with the DNR. Where are they leaning on? Because I mean, like, I don't want to, run a fool's errand on this. If we think it's leaning one way or the other, you know what I mean? Because like we can kind of do what we want, but we can't, and there's, DNR is going to have going to have pretty substantial say in this. So I'm curious where the winds are blowing, or what option we have for this case by case approval, because otherwise our choice is fairly clear.
Yeah, can we explain what that is? I mean, basically, the board recommended option 3, right? So were there specifics in option 3 the DNR is objecting to, or?
I'm sorry, I missed that. If you
Well, it was implied that option 3 was the recommendation, right?
Yes.
That's what you discussed with the DNR. So were there specifics on option 3 that the DNR said, no, that's too expensive or not necessary?
If, maybe as we go through the presentation, you'll see more of that.
Okay.
But I guess my quick answer right now is that the DNR didn't say no, okay? They said, answer these questions, monetize some of these things, and then come back. And I think it's a typical process with the DNR where you kind of float the idea and then you go back and forth a little bit and refine it and refine it and refine it. So I think that's the process we're in now. Scott, go ahead.
And if I may, previous discussions did not put a dollar amount to the non-monetary impacts. And if you go back to the chart, if Travis goes back to the other chart, the DNR is noticing that it was over the 10 to 20% to go to option 3. But they are asking, what are the non-monetary dollar amounts and how would that change option 1, 2?
All right.
And I think that's where Travis is headed in the presentation. And Scott, I'll hand it back to you.
I think we have, this is Scott Stearns with Strand. We have a wide open set of scenarios that we can look at. The purpose of going back and the purpose of them going and asking us to relook at some of the non-monetary costs and to, and to essentially monetize them based on risk would be to allow the city to be able to make the decisions that, that the city leaders want and that the city public wants. I don't think DNR would get in the way, and essentially they're saying under what scenarios they would nod their head and say, yeah, this is something we can get on board with. And essentially they're saying that if we can get within 10 to 20% on a total present worth basis between the lowest cost option, option 1, and the option that one potential option that is being considered, one of the option 3s, that they could get on board with that. That's what I'm getting from them.
No, thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it. I'll stop with my questions that we can continue with the presentation. Sorry, Travis.
No, not a problem. Good discussion. I'm glad we're talking through this as we go through the slides.
Yeah, that's an extremely important question. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Travis.
Hi, this is John Wright. Say one point of view we haven't looked at here. We're looking at revenue. I'm looking at slide 3, and we're looking at revenue per rate-paying customer. But to me, it doesn't show. I haven't seen any data. I don't recall data on how this is going to affect the rate that a customer pays, no matter what option we're doing. Is this? I know my own wastewater bill. I pay something like $7.50 a thousand. And I'd like to know how this is going to affect me, so that option right now, these the graph. What's the rate paying customer paying now? What's the annual revenue per customer at this point?
It's
Oh, I see the line there. Thanks for pointing that out. So regardless of what we're doing, the rate payer, this doubles what any sewer customer is paying. Correct? Doubles to 2.5, 3 times, no matter which option we take.
correct. Yeah. Yes.
So this is something that I would bet has not been communicated very well, and this is what's going to make customers, when they get their new bill and find out that instead of paying, $27 a month, they're paying $80 a month or $75 a month, and wondering how in the heck this happened. This is what I think, in the first place, really needs to be communicated, because the way we're looking at it right now, it's all from a revenue point of view. It's like we're running a company, but there's no point of view here from the rate-paying customer.
Yeah, so revenue could be, it's basically just rates. So what we're saying is, right now, the average is about $500 per year per customer, and then that goes up to about $1,000 per year per customer under option one if it's not phased.
I don't know if this is making a significant impact in anyone else's thinking or not. To me, I think it's all of a sudden telling your sewer customers that their rate doubles. Where does that happen with any other utility? I think it's just shocking no matter what we do.
John, if I may, this is Dwayne. You are correct in stating that the dollars are going to go up. But we have to realize that this is also a permit that is being renewed through the DNR, and it's a requirement. And so, as you are correctly stating, options 1, 2, or 3 will more than probably double the current rate. And that isn't necessarily a statement of whether we have a choice to do 1, 2, or 3. The permitting process will require us to do options 1, 2, or 3. Scott and Travis, anything you want to add or change to my comment there?
Well, I would just add to that it's not just changing permit limits, although that's certainly a part of it. It's also the fact that the plant, as it sits right now, doesn't have adequate capacity, which could lead to things like backups and overflows and other issues, and then the same issues resulting from broken down equipment because it's 30 years old. So it's kind of the combination of regulatory issues and inadequate capacity that's driving the higher costs.
Well, to me, that seems like a very weak argument, because every year this board sees the report that the DNR requires the wastewater treatment plant to do, and it's like we get A's and B's across the board. So it doesn't seem like that's a facility that's in any danger of we're not violating anything right now except in the odd occasion. So I just find that a weak argument.
And part of it is also due to that the project needs to be designed for 20 years from now to be an approvable project. DNR will want to see the projected flows and loads for 20 years out, and that's what the upgrades need to be designed for. So in a lot of cases, that's what's driving the need for additional infrastructure, more tanks, upsized equipment. It might be okay tomorrow, but it won't be at adequate capacity with the required redundancy 5 to 10 years from now.
How many communities are being affected like this? How many Wisconsin communities?
In regard to capacity or in regard to regulations?
I'm kind of, I might be whistling in the wind here, but we wouldn't be talking here at all if we didn't have if we hadn't had a new standard set by the DNR that we're not meeting. Is that correct?
Well, it's not that we're not meeting it, it's just it's going to change. So yeah, that's one of the drivers. I'll just point out John, and I should probably be better at giving you this information. Just because we're getting all A's, if you will, on our report, our annual report, doesn't mean we're not spending money to replace pumps and things like that. So what I should probably do is give you a list of these items that have reached the end of their life and are breaking. So we're spending money to keep those A's, if you will. I just need you to understand that. Like we just totally redid one of our oxidation ditches, and that's an expensive thing to do, but those get old.
So look, I'd like to just mention a couple of things here. On Paul's most recent comment here, the net present value, or the total present value analyses that have been done included doing all the maintenance ongoing on the existing plant. So the condition of the existing plant is what it is, but in the cost analysis, that has been taken into account. The other thing I want to mention is option 1 and 2 can be phased. Option 3 cannot be phased. Therefore, option 1 and 2 don't have to be a factor of 2 or more rate increase all at once, whereas option 3 does. And it's not unusual for rates to go up over time. We have made changes to our plant and spent dollars on our plant already, and of course the rates have to pay for that. So smaller rates or increases are possible with option 1 or option 2, with totaling eventually a factor of 2.
I think this is Scott, and I think the interesting thing is that, the delta between the gold bar between, kind of the minimum increase of option 1 or 2, and then going up to the option 3 is about $300 a month. And so what I look at, when I kind of looked at this, is $300 a year, excuse me, big difference. I think that's something, that's kind of the mindset that I'm looking at. So I really understand and I really appreciate the comment that was made regarding, eventually customers need to pay for this. That's absolutely the truth. And so, putting it into the, there's going to be a big increase. And so is another, percentage on top of that increase, is that worth getting the treatment plant where you ultimately want it? And I think, and that's a question. I mean, that wasn't a you want to move your treatment plant statement. That's a, if you do want to move it, now is the time to move it. If you don't want to move it, well, then there's, like you indicated, there are more economical ways to deal with it and to stay put. But you're making a decision, and if you're ever going to make a decision to move, now is the time to do it. So I think Travis is going to show some slides in a little bit later on. Sorry.
Well put, Scott. I'll just answer John's question a little bit more. You had asked, John, how often. A WPDS permit is a 5-year permit. Every wastewater plant in the state goes through that process on a 5-year basis. So how often does the permit change? Well, that depends on what stream you're discharging to. In this case, we're discharging currently to the Rock Creek, which is a smaller stream. And so anticipations and what's happening and occurring is that those limits are being more strict with each permit. But each treatment plant faces, to some degree, a revised permit every 5 years.
Yeah, and I'll just
What's
make a
your
comment
point,
quick
Dwayne?
that I'm sorry, what was that?
Dwayne, I'm not sure I understand your point.
John, did you say you do not understand my point?
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure what kind of point you're trying to make, though.
You had asked before, are there other communities that face this problem?
Yeah.
And maybe not to this degree, John, but every treatment plant in the state runs through this process of re-permitting on a 5-year basis.
Sure, I understand that process, but we're not talking about just a re-permitting process here, are we? Unless you're talking about the DNR threatening that they're not going to give us a permit because because of this, very big project that we're talking about here.
No,
My question earlier, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that we would not even be discussing this about the voting on one of these projects here unless the DNR had not been more strict in the certain pollution levels that they changed it, and we automatically, it's like they moved the goalpost, and we're no longer a good facility. We wouldn't be here if that weren't the case. Is that true?
Can't argue with that one.
True. And that's the concern as you look at these options, is we're already seeing a change in the Rock Creek in this permit cycle. The big question mark as you review these is what will happen in the future?
And I'd like to remind, again, option 2 addresses that as well as option 3.
Yeah, and I want to make it clear that we're not advocating for or against any option. We're responding to, when you forwarded option 3 to the council and they kicked it back for more information, every option is still on the table. There's no doubt about that. So if you want to go back, and I should say go back, if you want to review any of those again, that absolutely can happen. Absolutely. So you're not tied into anything right now.
Correct. I think we've tried to keep that clear, that we are not proposing one, we're giving you the options and trying to lay out what your future options are, and try to provide as much information to make the right decision for the city and the community and the boards, rather than the staff saying you should do this one versus a different one.
Well,
But there are
option
things
one
that
I thought
could be-
was off the table just because Rock Creek is just, we can't do that, right?
I think it's more risk and cost than the board has already decided it's worth.
Right, yeah, option 1.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, the only option that isn't on the table is doing nothing.
Well,
So, I mean, we have to do something here. And I
Well,
totally understand John's
that,
point
Paul-
about we're dealing with new regulations on phosphorus that the DNR has put in place. I guess we have to understand that why they do that, of course, is to protect the waterways. So it's not so much a case of we're at their mercy, it's that we need to work with them to make sure that we protect the environment, just like their focus is.
To that end, Paul, is there other things that we can do with the DNR before considering this as a kind of a last resort that we have to change our facility? I mean, I like my analogy that they've essentially moved the goalposts, and now we have to, we got to play by these new rules. What other actions can we take? Anything up to and including suing them for doing this to the city?
I'm going to look to Travis and Scott, because they probably have a little more experience with that, but are there options that don't require any kind of construction? I'm not aware of any. I mean, phosphorus is a big deal, but I don't know. I think it's a legitimate question.
how much more money spent on a lawsuit, because that'll come out of sewer rates as well.
Yeah, you have, so Travis, maybe you want to go to the schedule slide and maybe walk through some of those things, because we're kind of popping ahead here a little bit. But why don't you walk through what is driving this from a permit schedule? And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really talk to the legality of meeting your permit or not meeting your permit, but the city discharges under a state-issued NPDES permit issued by Wisconsin DNR. And so in that permit, there is an element here. So Travis, why don't you take it from there? That's a setup for you.
Yes, so the compliance schedule has been outlined in the latest draft permit that was provided by DNR. They actually sent it in early December for review, and what they sent is called a pre-draft permit. So it was the opportunity for the city and Strand to review the initial permit language before the actual draft permit is sent for the 30-day public notice period, when the whole world gets to comment on it if they want to. And in that pre-draft permit, there are a series of compliance steps related to meeting the new phosphorus limits, and I've outlined some of those here. So they want to have basically the facilities plan document submitted in April of this year, indicating how the city has chosen to comply with the phosphorus regulations. And then the next kind of major step in the compliance schedule was to submit plans and specs, so to have design complete for those upgrades in April of 2023, so a year from this April. And then, of course, there'd be a DNR review period to get plan approval. And then there is a limit to begin construction no later than December of 2023, with an ultimate limit for compliance with the limit by October of 2025. Now, this is not set in stone at this point. Like Paul mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there are opportunities to improve on this schedule, to maybe get some additional flexibility, depending on comments made during the public comment period, and then also ultimately if there is variance approval that we've been working through that process with DNR. But as of right now, this is the compliance schedule that's been handed down by DNR that we're working towards. And then I guess I would just add, in addition to this compliance schedule here, what DNR will want to see in the facility plan for the rest of the treatment plant is, so in the rest of the plant related to the non-phosphorus treatment components, in the facility plan, they will want to see a project implementation schedule detailing how the city plans to make the upgrades to bring up the different processes at the plant into compliance with the NR 110 code that governs the sizes and capacities that are required for the treatment plant. So they'll want to see the proposed schedule for design and construction of the non-phosphorus items at the treatment plant, as well as how the new phosphorus limits are being handled.
Just for reference too, and kind of to your point, John, these levels are coming from the EPA, not the DNR. I just took a quick check here. So the EPA is really one that's pushing this nationwide. So that would be a big battle. But if you're up for it, let's go.
Yeah. Well, that goes to my question. How many other communities does this affect? And I asked the question before, if the DNR is imposing this, moving those goalposts, where's the funds to, at the state level or at the EPA level to help a community do this rather than have the ratepayer bear 100% of it?
So there are some funds, John, unfortunately, many of those grants and loan funds that are out there are dictated on median household income in the community. Unfortunately, our current median household income in the community precludes us from meeting some of those funding opportunities, and that's an issue. So yes, there are other communities that do get more funding, and I would agree with you, John, your statement is right. The goalpost does change, and it is a big fear of mine as we're looking through each of these phases or each of these options, is that this isn't the only time that the goalposts will change in the next 60 years in the life of the treatment plant. Is that a fair statement, Scott?
Yeah, that's a good point, Dwayne, because we know for a fact that beyond just phosphorus, DNR has already told us that 10 to 15 years down the road, they do plan to implement total nitrogen removal limits as well, which will obviously have additional costs associated with that as well.
Well, that sounds like more excellent news for the ratepayer.
This plant has already gone through a phosphorus improvement a few years ago. I don't know if it's 10 years or what now.
I thought it was like 20.
I you know how time,
We've been,
it either flies or
we've
goes
been
slow.
yeah.
I just can't.
no, we've been discussing
it 20?
phosphorus removal for 20 years. It just comes up every like 5 where we have to do a project to keep doing and doing more. So the staff is looking for a recommendation to revote, correct, on an option? And are you do you have more to present?
Yeah, they were, I think the staff, they were, and some of what I heard is that there's some other options coming up or information about non-monetary.
So let's let the staff give the full presentation.
It'd be good to get through this so that we get the whole picture.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So, like I mentioned, the original graph that I showed at the beginning of this presentation didn't include the non-monetary impacts, and those are primarily risk of more stringent limits, the risk of greater costs at the existing site during construction due to the fact that it's constructed on an old landfill, cost of infrastructure in areas of new development such as north of the interstate, the proximity to residences, and then kind of the worst case scenario of putting additional funds into the existing treatment plant and then constructing a new plant 15, 20 years from now. And this captures some of those drawbacks and benefits that we had originally presented as factors that should be considered but weren't originally included in the costs. So going into that in a little bit more detail on how we applied costs to some of these factors. Regarding more stringent limits for phosphorus, we included costs of pumping to the Crawfish River that had actually already been incorporated into the cost. And then we added costs at the 10-year mark for those total nitrogen limits that I was just talking about, which would require some additional infrastructure at the oxidation ditches. And this table also shows where there's potential for lower costs than what we assumed in these risk factors and where there's potential for a higher cost. So for example, it's possible that in 10 years there'll be more efficient technology for total nitrogen removal, and that could result in lower costs than what we're assuming. But there could be even different limits in the future that are unknown at this point that could result in a higher cost. So for unsuitable soils due to the landfill, we assume that all excavated material would need to go to the landfill and not be placed in a berm on site like what was done during the last major treatment plant project. The cost could be lower if there's less landfill material encountered. Again, you're not going to know that really until you're in there doing the excavation. Cost could be higher if hazardous waste is encountered. We haven't included anything for sending material to hazardous waste landfills. Mercury or other chemicals were encountered that would increase the cost from what we assumed. Proximity to residences. So the code for treatment plants has a setback requirement of 500 feet from residences, and the current site does not meet that requirement, and which is okay because they're existing structures. But as far as constructing new facilities, they would actually get quite close to the homes in the trailer park. The future oxidation ditch location would end up being about 50 feet from some of the trailer park homes. So we've included a cost of purchasing the nearby trailer park at some point in the future. And when we've used the assessed value of the trailer park plus a 50% factor as a safety factor for that.
Is that for all options? Is that a cost for all options?
No, that would be a cost for options 1 and 2. The option 3 being outside the city wouldn't require that.
Okay.
Costs could decrease for that by purchasing just a portion of the trailer park if that is feasible, if it's possible to subdivide that to only purchase what's within 500 feet of the plant. Costs could increase because legal costs and relocation costs were not included in what we were assuming we were only going based off of the assessed value of the trailer park. We've mentioned in some of the previous presentations that storing some of the biosolids offsite is going to become necessary in the future as the plant reaches its capacity as far as site constraints for sludge storage. So having biosolids stored at a separate location outside the city is going to require additional staff time commitment. So we have assumed 1 additional full-time treatment plant staff to manage biosolids. We could get by with less staff to reduce that cost, or a cost could increase if there's additional equipment that's required because we didn't have that factored in, like, for example, trucking equipment. Repurposing the existing treatment plant site, the city could repurpose that to meet other needs of the city, to eliminate the need for buying other land within the city, so that those funds could be directed from the city to the treatment plant for that purpose. The site could just remain vacant, and that wouldn't be necessarily a cost, or there could be even higher revenue if the site is sold and the tax base is increased. Relocating the treatment plant in 20 years, this is kind of the worst case scenario, which you'll see in particular in the next slide that I have that show these costs. But if for some reason that limits change even further, or if there's much higher growth than what's expected, and that there's funds that are directed to the existing plant site to make these upgrades, and then it's decided in 15 or 20 years that the treatment plant has to move locations, that ends up being the highest cost option. So things could remain the same, and that wouldn't be an issue. But again, if there are increased costs in the future, that would cause the treatment plant to move. Costs could increase even higher because of inflation or rising land prices. That it could become more costly to move the plant in the future than it is right now. And then finally, a buffer between the new treatment plant and surrounding properties. We wanted to monetize the impact of keeping the treatment plant within the city near residences. And we did that through adding odor control at the existing treatment plant site. odor control would not be required for option 3 because it's assumed that it would be located well away from businesses and residences. That cost could be eliminated if everyone agrees that odor control is not needed. This item, the cost could increase beyond just odor control if it's decided that because the treatment plant continues to expand and get closer to residences, if additional barriers such as decorative fencing needs to get added, then that would be an additional cost beyond what we've assumed. So it's kind of all pulled together in this graph here. So on the left side of the graph, in the solid bars there, shows the total present worth or a 20-year basis for options 1, 2, and then the 3 options for option 3. And then the bars that have been added are option 1, including the monetized risk that I just went through, and option 2 with the monetized risk. And you can see how the different factors that I just walked through add up to equal 90% of option 3 for what I'm calling baseline risk. So that's basically all the factors except for moving the treatment plant in 20 years, if kind of the worst case scenario. Because obviously if you move the treatment plant after making a significant investment in some of the upgrades at the existing site, then the costs increase substantially and it becomes easily the highest cost option. So we had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that DNR said that they that in order to approve something that's not the lowest cost option, it needs to be within 10%. And we're showing here that if you incorporate risk and monetize some of the risk factors that I went through, that option 1 actually becomes to have 90% of the total present worth compared to option 3. They're within 10% of each other. So I know that was a lot of data and information and assumptions that I went through. Open to discussion and questions on this.
So the 134%, which includes the relocation in 20 years, that's you assuming growth higher than the DOA growth rates, I believe. And since the DNR goes by the DOA growth rates, they won't be considering that factor. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, and that's why we wanted to separate that out. But we thought it was important to show the worst case scenario, and it might not just be population that would drive that decision. It could be other factors that we can't foresee right now, such as other permit limits that come about from what DNR calls contaminants of emerging concern. If you've been following the news and have been listening about PFAS being an issue, items like that aren't even on our radar right now could come up and cause that to be a possibility. So we wanted to at least show the range here as far as where the cost could end up if that scenario played out.
Travis, and for John, this is Dwayne. I was waiting for this slide to kind of say that green area is that movement of the goalpost in the future. Okay. It's not the movement that you're already seeing that's happening from our last permit to this permit. That green area is representing the what if the goalpost moves again.
And the other thing we haven't discussed is on option 3, I believe our permit limits were increased a little bit because it was a new facility, new permit. We actually got a little bit more leeway on some of our discharge issues, didn't we? There were a couple items I thought that we got improved.
Yes, that's correct. So phosphorus for sure, and then BOD, there's a less stringent limit for that as well on the crawfish for a new treatment plant site.
So that would buy us a little bit of moving that goalpost also. That would give us a little bit more option there.
I would disagree that that affects the goalpost because that increase in limit was due to the anti-backsliding rule. So I would think that the DNR would make new limits based upon the requirements of the environment, not on the requirement, not what your current limits are.
So there's sorry. Do you want to explain backsliding, or do you want me to, Travis?
Go ahead. I didn't quite catch all that. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a, for lack of a better term, there's an anti-backsliding rule that's put together. And so if you show that you can meet a certain limit at your plant, in the future, DNR would not allow you to turn that limit down because essentially you've already proven that you can meet a certain limit. However, if you have a new plant, new discharge, all rules are off, and then it is more of a what's that water body intended use, and how clean does the water need to be discharged from a treatment plant in order for that water body to be used for its intended purpose.
My point was that, let's say the BOD limit for the water body got to be more stringent.
Oh.
It wouldn't matter whether it was the current
You're right.
new plant or the existing plant, because it would be based on the body of water, correct?
You're correct. However, if you have a new plant, that would be the one. If you have a new plant, new discharge, that would give you the most loose BOD permit limit. So I agree with what you're saying.
So I have a question for the board. I just want to level set on where we're at with this. So I know that one of the initial things we did off the bat was we threw out option one, just because, and I think we can see it in this chart when the non-monetized risks are factored in. It's a risky proposition. Are we still of the same mind with that, where it's a question between options 2 and 3? I just want to gauge where the board's at with this.
Yeah, in my opinion, yeah. I don't think Rock Creek it's a viable option. It's too small. And
Going forward with option 1, it has greater future risk because they may reclassify the stream, basically making the requirements more strict more quickly.
Steve, John, what do you think?
Yeah,
are we
sorry,
still on board?
I was trying to find my unmute button. Excellent question, Bennett. I think I'm right now. I'm heavily leaning towards option 2. I see option 1 as not viable, not a viable choice.
Was given some thought, in the newspaper articles that came out about this. I think a city council member posed the question of if we would be able to increase rates immediately, or as soon as possible, even before we get approval for this or construction of the plant begins, because we know it's just going to be a significant increase. And if we can phase some of that in, it would make sense to do so. Is that a possibility that's on the table to address some of this whiplash that John and I think a number of other board members have had concerns about?
My only comment is, first, this apology, that came up before and we didn't really check into it. Again, there's really no agency that regulates rates like we've seen with the PSC. So just off the cuff, okay, so when the newspaper picks this up, I want it off the cuff. We could probably do that. To what extent, I don't know. Again, typically wastewater rates are done based on what the community will allow. And I don't even know if there's a public hearing that has to be held for that sort of thing. But that's my short answer. My long answer is let's check it out. And
I
see
thought
to
it
what
goes to
extent
the
we do
PSC.
it. I'm sorry,
Doesn't sewer rates go through the PSC?
no,
Oh, I thought they did.
no, they don't.
The electric and water?
Yes. And gas and all that stuff, but.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but there is really no rate regulatory agency that, other than what we're seeing with when you want to make significant changes to your plant. So let me research it a little bit. Don't take that as the final answer, but let me research that a little bit more.
I'd be curious what the other board members think about that, just because I would rather get ahead of this issue. And to the point that's been made before, this is going to cause an uproar likely when the rate increases actually get implemented, and the decision will have been made, years in the past at that point. And I'd rather address some of this at the front end, regardless of what we go with, whether it's 2 or 3.
I would just add that the rate ordinance needs to be adopted so that it can be included in the Clean Water Fund loan application and approval that typically occurs just prior to construction, that you would close on the loan so that then you could start drawing on the loan for your payment applications during construction. So from that standpoint, if we say that construction is going to start at the end of 2023, there is some time there in order to prepare for or possibly doing incremental rate increases before that time frame. But DNR will want to see the ordinance in the loan application, or they won't approve the loan. They want to see that a plan is in place so that they know that the payments can be made.
You're saying an ordinance for a new rate increase that's been being paid already?
The change to the ordinance for the rate increase. They'll want to see that documentation in the Clean Water Fund application.
Okay.
And I realize this is probably understood in the discussion, but then I would assume that we have to somehow identify or place that money in some kind of a fund.
That I was thinking too, what kind of accounting do we have to do? I mean, we just can't tell people we're going to raise rates to prepay something. We have to show that we're actually saving it.
Right. So we would have to make sure we have that lined up, that there is a fund that's being, we right now have a DNR replacement fund, but that's totally different ballgame. Anyway, so yeah, if we, along with any kind of a incremental rate increase, we'd also have to identify that we're putting these funds here and it's specifically for this task, so that somebody doesn't come along sometime, you guys have all moved on and somebody says, hey, let's take that $1 million and go spend it on a new porch for Greg or something like that. So I realize that's probably inferred or implied. I don't know which one comes into play here, but certainly that would have to be part of the ordinance, that we've got a fund for this.
Yeah.
And John, if I may just clarify, when I stated before, it's not like we are going to look for funding opportunities to reduce this cost to the ratepayer. It's just that many of them are related to that median household income. And Travis has just mentioned, we will be looking at the Clean Water Fund as an option. I think that maybe that was not stated. I think I made the assumption that everyone understood that we would be looking for as much financial assistance to keep the ratepayer costs down as much as possible through this. It's just that sometimes it is an uphill battle. Is that fair?
Is there an option that would lend itself to more financial assistance?
quit our jobs and go on unemployment, then we qualify as a low-income
Well, I'm
city.
saying maybe there's more subsidies for retrofitting a building or more subsidies for new technology. Is there an area where we have an opportunity to maybe capitalize on additional funding easier?
Not aware of that offhand, but we would certainly look into that for sure.
Just thought it might help with the decision-making process.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know, it's an infrastructure bill, that there might be something there. I keep coming back to John's comments, and I fully agree with him, and it would seem like if there's enough pushback from enough cities, that there would have to be some kind of a funding mechanism or something put in place. I realize typically that's not how big government works. They just.
Then we're just using their paychecks to pay for this rather
Yeah.
than a sewer bill, so
Yeah,
it's not
but
really making it cheaper.
Yes, agreed. But I guess the general point is we'll keep looking and we'll see what options there are. We'll talk to other places and see how they're dealing with this, and certainly don't have to go this alone.
What,
We still have to stay on track, though. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, like Fort, their treatment plant is in the industrial park, right? Along the bike trail, so they don't have to worry about this being so close to residential and.
Yeah, and they probably have
Yeah.
a little better discharge into the
Into
Rock
the-
River and stuff,
Yeah.
Nobody's situation is identical, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm
That
sure
doesn't mean-
Watertown is near the Rock River, so
Yeah.
it just,
My son lives in a small town, and their system discharges into the Bark River, and I know they've gone through some recent changes which have increased rates. I don't know exactly what all the changes were, though. But not every community is on a big river.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have some questions. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
No, Ben, you go ahead.
Whoever
I was just going to summarize, so go ahead.
I have some questions on the risks that we were trying to monetize. So there was one in here, proximity to residences, and it talked about the proximity to trailer park. Now, if I remember correctly, a couple months ago we talked about this a little bit and some of the substantial risks associated with relocating residences where people live. And I remember Steve Wilkie indicating that was a very challenging hill to climb. And I noticed in here that we have legal, potential for legal ramifications and relocation costs. I guess I didn't realize that it was going to be as close to the existing trailer park as possible, or as it was, like within 50 feet.
Is that setback a city ordinance or is that a state?
DNR.
DNR.
So, yeah, it's a DNR requirement, and I think part of this is not necessarily that DNR would force the issue and force the city to buy it. I don't think that is going to happen, although it's possible because it is in the code. I think part of it is just the quality of living, issue of odors and noise. The equipment makes noise all the time. The aerators on the oxidation ditches are running, and you're going to be able to hear it. So it's kind of a socioeconomic type issue of capturing that value of not having residences so close to the treatment plant, because in option 3 you don't have that issue. So we're trying to just get it so that we're comparing apples to apples, and that's where it comes into monetizing that item.
So in the current option 1 and 2 costs, was there cost for dealing with this by purchasing a portion?
Not in the original costs, only what we've added into what I'm calling this baseline risk. Then that cost is added into here, except for we haven't included legal fees or relocation fees or anything like that. But in the original cost, purchasing the trailer park was not included.
And is that just something where we may have to do it, or are we pretty much, or is it going to be a must for us to do option 2, to purchase some of the trailer park?
I would not say that you're obligated to do that. It's more of a, does the city want to have the treatment plant so close to residences?
And I would think that if DNR required us to do that, then we could reconsider our options because of the higher cost. I mean, if the costs don't currently include it and they suggest, oh, do this because it's a lower cost, and then they say, oh, but do this because then it changes the costs, obviously.
So I'm curious, because right now we don't meet, there's a setback of 500 feet.
Correct. Yeah.
And we don't meet that currently, but we're grandfathered in.
Correct.
But we're going to be building new structures in option 2, and we're going to be further decreasing that setback.
Yes.
So then it would be kind of, am I correct in assuming that it's a little bit of a flip of a coin as to, we could get pushback on this, but we could not? It's a flip of a coin as to what may happen with that?
So DNR has said that there's definitely a possibility that they would allow the plant to continue to construct even within the existing site limit, even though they're going to be getting closer to residences. But they wanted us to comment on that as part of this non-monetary evaluation. And this is where it gets difficult to monetize some of these items. This is more of a question as far as, just quality of life for people that are going to be living 50 feet from wastewater treatment structures. So I think that there's a good chance that DNR would not force the city to buy this. But it does need to be captured in this evaluation and discussed, because again, you don't have that issue in option 3. And, if they want us to fully weigh the non-monetary factors, we needed some way of incorporating that into this graphic. And we did that by assuming the trailer park would be purchased.
Is there any risk that the owner of the property, the trailer park, say, would have legal standing to get compensation for lost value of the property if we build up close to the property line? I know I've seen that in landfill negotiations where they have to offset the devaluation of the property around it.
I'm sure that would have to be a part of it. And we get complaints about land values going down if we put a power line by it. So certainly I could see that issue being raised, and that's
part of this risk column.
Yeah, there's a financial impact to that too. Which one's greater, I don't know, but certainly I could see that happening quite easily.
Although I bet we don't pay for power lines. If a power line goes up, we don't actually compensate anybody, do we?
No, but we get complaints, and quite honestly, like transmission lines, they do end up compensating people.
So for the ATC line through the
Yeah,
town?
you bet.
Yeah.
So, and it's not, I guess it's just an analogy that people view almost anything
Yes.
as affecting their property value. Whether they're right or wrong, I'm not saying, but that's always an argument.
Oh, you advocated option 2. Was anything changed your mind on that? I mean, there's.
No.
I'd like to move that we have our motion filled in with option 2, up or down.
All right, we have a motion from John Misty for option 2 for motion 22-1-1. Is there a second?
I'll second that. This is Bennett.
Bennett seconded it. So we have a motion for option 2.
This motion would be to approve
Option 2.
option 2. Okay.
So does anyone want to reiterate the pros and the cons of that? Option 2? Obviously, it's less of a rate increase, right?
And it can be phased.
It can be phased, yeah. Phased.
I think Mark's points that it can be phased as opposed to, kind of lump sum is, I'm very much for that. And I think it gives us flexibility a little bit as time goes on and we discover more things like possibly there is money out there, that type of thing. We're not, I just believe this is the best option. I wholly subscribe to Mark's thinking on it.
Can we go back to phasing? Like, so what the time increments for that again? Sorry, I remember we talked about this, but it was probably a couple of meetings ago.
So in options 1 and 2, there are some components such as the new oxidation ditch that can be phased out 10 years. So just roughly about half of the upgrades could be done in the near term, in the next years. And then the other half could be done in a project 10 years from now. So looking at this rate increase graph here for options 1 and 2, you could cut that bar in half above, the portion of the bar that's above the black line. You could cut those in half for option 1 and 2 for the phasing aspect of it. Just roughly speaking, obviously it would need to be decided as we complete the facility plan document as far as what exactly gets included in each phase, but they could be roughly phased about half and half.
Thanks, Travis. Appreciate it.
If those options are phased, is the dollar values that you're showing on here taking into increased costs, escalation of costs then? Or is these costs based on doing it at one time? Because if we're seeing 7-8% inflation, I'm just going to use that number over 10 years. Are them the true numbers then?
So these costs are based on doing it all at once. Yes, certainly if high inflation continues, then yes, there would need to be that would increase the second rate increase 10 years from now, depending on how exactly inflation shook out.
So we would put that in a risk column.
Well, but on the flip side, you're not paying interest. If you do it all at once, you're not paying interest on the loan that you take out to do it all at once. So that's the opposite argument.
Yeah, but typically inflation is, especially now, far outpacing the low interest rate that we would pay on a Clean Water Act loan that we would theoretically get for this project.
And interest rates are only going to go up at this point.
So you're saying we should do it all right away, even though we don't have to. It would be better to do it all right away.
We could.
Yeah, but I'm asking Steve, would it be better to do it all right away?
I guess that's our decision. That's what I'm looking at between.
I'm asking what you think we should do.
What I'm looking at is the balance is, if you're going with option 2, then it makes sense to phase it to try and keep costs down. If you're looking at option 3 to keep your risk to a minimum down the road, it's easier to justify it now with the lower interest rates and you have the entire facility. I've controlled my risk now. I know exactly what I have. With option 2, I'm going to roll the dice a little bit on what it's going to cost me down the road in 10 years. I'm going to throw some of that risk out there, and I'm going to take that chance on option 2. That's really what we're here to weigh out is what are we willing to spend and what risks are we willing to take? And that's really what it comes down to in my mind.
In general, I prefer spending money later rather than sooner because once it's spent, you can't change your mind. Whereas 10 years from now, Maybe a third oxidation ditch won't be the best solution. Maybe technology changes. So that's the risk of spending it all right away. You can look at it all sorts of different ways. There's different ways of looking at risk.
There's no perfect solution. That's why we're sitting here discussing it.
Now,
Far from it.
let me throw this out, though, as kind of a different take on that. We had talked about looking into whether or not we can begin rate increases and build to a certain point. Your motion right now is to accept or to move forward with option 2, which is a physical change. What if we, and I'm talking kind of to Scott and Travis, what if we now go back and look at what that phasing would do, what some of the what-ifs on that would be, and to what extent we could also begin to build a fund so that we're ready in however many years to take another step. I'm throwing that out as a way to look at the financing and the rate increases and all that stuff. And that, I'm not advocating that be in the motion, that simply be a directive to staff to investigate.
I think that would paint the picture a little bit better for us. I mean, the more details we get, the easier it should make the decision, or hopefully would clarify some things.
You know, I'd offer that it's for us to make a decision here tonight, and there are staff people at the city level that can deal with financial risks. They do it every day for many other things that the city does. And trying to make a decision today, guessing that inflation is going to stay at 7% for the next 5 years or next 3 years or the next 11 years is a little bit beyond the scope of what we should be doing as a board.
I would actually disagree with that. I think that we do need to be looking 20 to 30 years out, right? I mean, like right now we're taking a very present focus and saying, look what it's going to do to rates tomorrow potentially, right? But like the biggest risk that we can see with any of these things is that if we decide on this and worst case scenario, we have to build a new plant in 15 to 20 years. We've just sunk the future prospects of the city, right? I mean, like we talk about excessive rate increases, and you're still going to be dealing with, even if you phase option 2, there's going to be extreme frustration. It's going to be an over 50% rate increase overnight. And we may do it all at once, which would double it. At a certain point, rates are increasing so much. Do you think that people are really going to parse out? Like, I mean, if we increased rates $100 per year, we would get an avalanche of complaints on this. I'm just trying to think in terms of getting an option that we have the most flexibility going forward in the future, and what is going to set us up, not necessarily best for tomorrow, but for 10, 15, 30 years down the line. I think that's option 3. But I think my points have been, I mean, I think it's pretty well known where I stand on it.
I take your points, and by the same analysis, I think it's option 2.
Yeah.
Well, nobody said this was going to be easy, but that's why you guys get the big bucks. So.
This is Travis. I just want to clarify a couple things based on some of the comments on the rates. So I wanted to clarify that option 3 cannot be phased because the entire plant would have to be constructed at once. It wouldn't really be feasible to construct, have some processes running at the existing site and then different processes running at a site 3 miles away. So there really is no phasing that's practical for option 3. It's only for option 1 and 2. And then for option, so like for example, for option 2 on the phasing, there was some questions about, well, what would that mean for rates now? And it would move rates roughly up to that $800 per year mark. So about an increase of about $300 per year above the existing level, and then that additional $300 per year for the project 10 years from now that's going to change depending on inflation and how you incorporate the time value of money. So maybe that project, worst case gets, 40 or 50% higher in the future. That could move that rate increase so that you'd end up, if you apply 40 or 50% factor to that $300 per year that's left over, that gets you up here to that $1,200, $1,300 mark. That's comparable to option 3, but it really depends on what assumptions you use for inflation, what you're assuming for the value of money that you've now borrowed that you're paying interest on. There's different assumptions that we could do there, but I think you're going to end up somewhere between this dashed line and this bar when it's all said and done, with what we know now.
It's still not certain.
And you
So-
throw
Yeah,
the
I
risk
mean,
factors on top of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you're really guessing, looking that far out.
Yeah.
That's our job, is to use the crystal ball and give it our
Because
best guess for the future.
Because I know there's some communities that have overbuilt and growth never came, and some that just said, well, we'll just be safe, and the treatment plant was, I guess, obsolete in 5 years, so.
Yeah. I don't know if you're trying to make a right or a wrong decision. I think you're trying to make the best decision you can with the information you've got. The other thing I'll throw in here that, obviously we will go back to the DNR once, you've made a decision here if it's different than what you had previously, and say, what do you think of this now? And how would this fly? So we'll get some feedback from them. And I think, I realize, I totally understand both what John and Bennett are saying. I think it's worthwhile to take a look at what phasing would do to the rates, and if we can add a little bit to that, just as part of the discussion, unless you absolutely say, no, that's useless information. But from a financial standpoint, I think we need to take a look at that, again, just as a piece of information for you. And John's right, we look at that virtually every day, the cost-benefit analysis of stuff, and I think it's worthwhile doing in this case, too.
What's the major cost in the first phase of option 2?
The major costs are influent pumping, screening, I believe the final clarifier, and UV disinfection, converting from chlorination to UV disinfection. Those would be the big ticket items.
Well, I think, wouldn't getting to the crawfish be a big part of that, too?
Yeah, oh, yes, and that portion of it as well, yeah.
Which really is one of our main goals here.
Yes. So I was wondering if, I was thinking that the major cost of option 2, phase 1, is that effluent piping. And I was wondering if that could be designed to be, laying a pipe is pretty expensive. So I was wondering if that effluent piping could be designed to be influent piping as well, if 10 years down the road it made sense to build a new plant at the crawfish at that point in time.
Oh, that's a great point. I think that should definitely be considered.
It could, but at the same token, then we'll be discussing the location of that outlet, which would then impact
Cost.
other options as well. If option 2 is considered and we're not considering 3, we're probably looking at going due east of the plant. If we're looking at the new plant in option 3, we're probably looking at somewhere north on the crawfish, north of the interstate with the new plant. So yes and no to your point that yes, it could be, but is that, if the option 3 ultimately has to be built, which is that worst case scenario in Travis's last slide, at that point, you might now have an outlet that maybe isn't the best location for that future plant. Is that?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, but if we're looking at what if in this time frame stuff starts to happen on the north side of the interstate, then it's a very logical thing to begin doing, is getting to the north side. So, yeah, I mean,
That's been going on for 20 years.
yeah, I think it's getting a little, yeah, I understand. I think it's getting a
Oh,
little
what
more,
is going to go over there? Because
it's getting a little more serious now. I think there's some people that are getting ready to cash out, so I think it's a little more serious now.
cash out, like the
Sell
landowners.
their property, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, they've been wanting to sell for years. It's just they needed a developer's money to build something.
Yeah, you're right. I'm playing what if.
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
not very good at it yet, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
Well, we got our motion out there. We ready to take a vote on option 2?
Yeah. All right, Misty, can you take a roll call vote?
Yes, I just want to, I think that Mr. Polachek has joined us. Is that correct?
I've been here all along. Yep. I've been listening.
No, okay.
Okay, I just want to make sure for the roll call.
All right.
Yes, I've been here since the beginning.
Mr. Temperley?
Aye.
Can you read the motion again, please?
It's for option 2?
Maybe, Misty, just the last line of the, that prepared motion.
Thank you.
This is for motion 22-1-1, recommendation to City Council for wastewater treatment plant facility and design option. Be it therefore moved this 11th day of January 2022 by the Public Works Board of the City of Lake Mills that the Public Works Board does hereby recommend the City Council proceed with wastewater treatment plant facility and design option number 2.
You got it, Greg?
Yep, thank you.
I'm just going to restart. Mr. Temperley?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
No.
Mr. Polachek?
No.
Mr. Reich?
Aye.
Mr. Rupplinger?
No.
Mr. Picard?
Aye.
So it's a split vote, Greg, so.
heard.
I understand the no vote. I'm not going to demonize that. I understand that, so.
Yeah.
So I guess our options are to vote on option 3, and see if it comes out 3-3.
It-
Go to the council with that.
Well, it's a split vote.
You would think it would, you would think it would be the same.
Yeah, but
The other way.
you have 5 members, so city council have 5 members.
No, you're saying to make a new motion.
Make a new motion for 3 and see if it comes out the same.
I can't hear whoever's speaking.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry,
It'd be still a split vote, right?
Possibly. Maybe not.
Unless somebody wanted to change your vote.
Yeah. No, I mean, this happens. It's a split vote from a board. And even so, if we would have came out with a 6-0, it's been known for the council to say, nuts to the board, we're going to vote this way. So,
So I think it's up to your board to see.
Yeah, so who's ever talking right now? We can't
Oh,
hear you on the online
okay.
side.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's, Mr. Waters is speaking. He's simply encouraging them to maybe redo the option with option number, or redo the motion with option number 3 and try another vote.
yeah,
It
the
comes
city
up
council
split.
president is here. He was hoping for a majority vote. But I'm explaining to him that it's really not necessary. I mean, you just take that in consideration when the council discusses. There's a split.
Yeah, but Todd,
opinion.
we could take it. It would take like 2 minutes, and then we could, if we have the same outcome, we have the same outcome. Then we could. Just
Yeah, we're going to
separate
say the
that
same
launch, right?
outcome. I mean,
I'll make an option or a motion to entertain option 3A as the design
no, I
selection
don't.
for.
No, we've already made a motion and voted on it. So,
I
I mean, but the question is, anyone want to second that?
I think we just let it stand. right?
If he
Yeah,
wants, he should be able to make another motion to take another vote.
but why would that change how the council's
It might
gonna?
not change a thing.
Yeah,
It might not.
yeah.
But it's still, he
But it's
has
going
the
to take,
option to
it's
make
going
the
to take
motion.
60 seconds. So I'll repeat it. I'll make I will make a motion to recommend option 3A, just the new wastewater treatment plant with the oxidation ditch. Do I have a second?
I second it.
I'm not understanding how this motion's different.
He just wants to take a roll call vote on option A, or option 3A is what he's made a motion for.
Was there a 3A?
It was-
Oxidation
Yes.
ditch.
Oh,
New plant oxidation ditch.
okay.
That would be the recommendation to council.
A new plant on the existing site?
No, on a new site. It's still
New
3.
site. So we're gonna vote on a new site?
Misty, did you get that? Do you understand what he was motioning?
Yes, it's 3A as the option,
Correct.
the prepared motion.
So basically, all he's doing is taking this and putting 3A in the blank instead of, we just voted on 2. Now this time he's putting 3A in the blank.
Okay. All right. So Bennett made a motion for 3A, and who was that? Was that Greg?
Yes.
That seconded it. All right. All right, another roll call vote then.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mr. Polachek?
Aye.
Mr. Reich?
No.
Mr. Rupplinger?
Aye.
Mr. Picard?
No.
Mr. Temperley?
Yeah, no, I don't understand how it was different from. So we have a split vote.
It's not different.
Yeah, it's not different.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
But now we've covered our bases.
Yes, we have.
We've confirmed the city council we're deadlocked.
Yeah, it's not disaster.
No.
I think it's a friendly.
Well, at least all the viewpoints have been fully discussed. I
Yeah.
think that the discussion tonight has been excellent,
Yeah.
much better than the last time. So
Yeah.
I feel comfortable.
Yeah, it's a difficult choice, and
Yes.
if it goes for 3, I can see why.
I go back to what I said before. There's no perfect answer for this.
Never is.
We just gotta weigh how much risk and which direction we want to go. And that's really what it comes down to, is what risk tolerance do you have?
Yeah, I've seen communities overbuild and underbuild. So,
And we're underbuilding.
yeah.
The vote's
All right.
And it's gonna hurt when we catch up.
Yeah. Next agenda item, recommendations for future agendas.
Well, it's sure not going to be wastewater treatment plant.
Just a quick question on that. What happens? I mean, like, are we just, we are not able to provide a recommendation to city council and they're just going to have to make a call?
Yeah, hopefully they'll watch this meeting.
They'd make a call anyways, no matter what we
Yeah,
said.
yeah, I've been on the council, yeah. I mean, hopefully they'll watch the meeting. Greg, and the council president's here. Mr. Fields is here, so hopefully be a friendly discussion.
We'll take back our discussions here and, the
Yeah.
pros and cons of what we discussed both ways, and, I'm
Yeah.
gonna be there also to, reiterate the numbers and go through the risks again, and
And if they come under personal attack, I'll speak against that, because it's not,
we'll always welcome opinions at council. Otherwise, we have about the same crowd we have here today.
yeah, so.
Well, and, the council will get a copy of the minutes, and the minutes will indicate 2 votes were taken. And
They
again,
won't
they'll
see
have-
this meeting minute until we approve them next time.
Right.
They get the video, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
they won't see them for another month before they get to them.
Correct, which is a point I wanted to make too, is that, this won't go to the council next week. As far as I know, I don't think it's on your agenda,
Really?
Greg, I don't.
Yeah, but even if it goes to,
Yeah, so, and I
Yeah.
don't,
we'll have 2 meetings on council before the meeting minutes get approved.
yeah. And again, we have yet another meeting with the DNR in the next week or so. And I guess the other thing I'll say is if there's any information you want, and I'm talking, both to you, Mr. Waters, and to any of you guys, if there's other information that you want, either from Travis or Scott or Dwayne or I or whatever in this regard, let us know. We'll make sure the council gets that. And then I guess just like last time, it'll go to the council and they'll decide which way to go, and it may come back here. I don't know, but we'll see. I have not
Send it back here.
Don't send it back here?
Don't send it back here.
Well, I have never been in a situation like this. I'm very interested. I agree, it's been great discussion, and I think it should be. So, yeah. As far as future agendas, though, which I guess was the topic, next month, we will have the next look at the water deep dive. So we will do that. And then if everything goes well, coming up in May, we'll try to have our road tour. Again, hopefully we can do it live as opposed to in virtual, but we'll see. Oh, and certainly there'll be the maintenance, street maintenance projects and that sort of thing will be coming up here in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
Other things that we may be talking about is, and I hope I'm not stepping out of line here, is the COVID funds, the use of the COVID funds. That's not the right name, I forget what it's, thank you. Yeah, and see if you have some recommendations for the use of those funds, we'll bring that to you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What was the name, the correct name?
ARPA, it's the
American
American
Rescue.
Reinvestment Act or something like that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's not right, but you get the point, I guess, right?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
Okay.
And just to be clear on those funds, those can occur within any department within the city,
Yeah.
not just Public Works.
Right.
Correct.
Right. So we're going to bring you some ideas. I believe that's right, yes.
3.
Yeah, because we actually get the money in a couple different chunks, don't we?
That's correct.
It's kind of phased.
And
I have a potential, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I keep interrupting people, and I think mostly you, Bennett, so go ahead.
Because I'm talking too much. What current yard waste site? I think that's been a topic in the past. Are we going to entertain possibly moving that, or future options for it, or where are we at with that?
Let me just put this is for future, so I think
That's,
the council's secretly deciding on a location, right? And it's bidding, and you can't make publicly how much you're.
I don't know if it's secret, but it's one of the things on our strategic plan list
Yeah.
is that we're looking into and doing some studies on it.
Yeah, why don't we just have an agenda item where Steve will
Sure.
tell us what he can tell, because some things have to be still confidential.
Correct.
It hasn't gone away. It's a topic that kind of ebbs and flows.
Right, and speaking of yard waste, Watertown had a pilot program where they gave out big bags so people could take the yard waste themselves. Let me contact them to see how well that went.
Sure.
The whole idea was obviously to reduce staff having to pick it up
Yeah.
and encourage people to take it over themselves if they had big bags to do so.
I'd encourage you to do some research and send an email. I know Misty's not in the room, but I can see her looking at me saying, that's not on the agenda. That's not on the agenda.
Well, I can do that myself.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Thank you, Paul.
What? It's not on the agenda, is it?
Yep, it's not on the agenda.
All right. All right.
Looking at Bennett, maybe we should consider shipping it out to San Francisco and throwing it in the bay.
All right.
That's right.
So that's it for future agendas, and so I'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.